fired and walking home, until two helicopters landed shouting, "Where's the nurse?" They handed her a cardboard box and told her she was finished. 28 years of saving lives, gone in a 15-minute meeting. Catherine Morrison, 52 years old, the best ICU trauma nurse Harborview VA Hospital had ever employed, was being forced into retirement because she refused to lie. Dr. Richard Volkov had demanded she sign falsified patient records covering up a medical error that killed a decorated Marine. She said no. He said she'd never work in medicine again. He kept his promise. Now she was walking home in a February blizzard, broke, humiliated, and invisible. What she didn't know was that a Coast Guard helicopter was about to crash into the frozen lake outside her window, and the crew inside, drowning in 34-degree water, needed a miracle. They needed someone who didn't care about rules or liability or whether they had permission. They needed Catherine Morrison. And she was about to remind the world that you don't stop being a nurse just because someone takes away your badge. If you think the system protects the brave and punishes the corrupt, this story will shatter that illusion in the most powerful way possible. So hit subscribe right now, because what happens next proves that real heroes don't wait for permission to save lives, they just act. The security guard wouldn't meet Catherine's eyes as he walked her to the employee exit of Harborview VA Hospital. Eddie Martinez had known her for 16 years, had watched her save countless veterans, had seen her work 30-hour shifts during the pandemic without complaint. Now he was escorting her out like a criminal because Dr. Volkov had made a phone call and the administration had folded instantly. Catherine carried everything she owned from her locker in a cardboard box that wasn't even big enough to be dignified. A stethoscope her late husband Tom had given her when she graduated nursing school. A coffee mug that said "Nurses Save Lives" in Comic Sans font. 3 framed certifications, including her advanced trauma life support card that had been renewed every 2 years for nearly 3 decades. A photo of Tom in his Coast Guard dress uniform taken 2 weeks before the rescue mission that killed him. The box was pathetically light. 28 years reduced to 4 pounds of memories. The automatic doors opened, and the Wisconsin winter hit her like a physical assault. -15 degrees with wind chill that turned exposed skin numb in seconds. Catherine didn't have her car because the transmission had died 3 weeks ago, and the repair estimate was $1,800 she didn't have. She'd been taking the bus to work, a 40-minute ride that required 2 transfers. But today she'd missed the schedule, and the next bus wouldn't come for 90 minutes. So she walked. Her apartment was only 2 miles away along the lakefront. She could make it if she moved fast. The snow was falling in thick, aggressive flakes that stuck to her glasses and made the sidewalk treacherous. She pulled her inadequate coat tighter and started the walk that felt like a funeral march for her entire professional life. Milwaukee's lakefront in February was brutal, the kind of cold that made your teeth ache and your lungs burn with every breath. Lake Michigan stretched out to her right, a vast expanse of gray ice and darker gray water, waves crashing against the frozen shore with a sound like breaking bones. Catherine's mind was trapped in a loop, replaying the meeting. Dr. Volkov sitting behind his mahogany desk, fingers steepled like a movie villain, explaining that her services were no longer required. The hospital couldn't afford the liability of a nurse who refused to follow proper channels. When she tried to explain that proper channels meant covering up negligence that killed a patient, Volkov had smiled. "That's a very serious accusation, Catherine, and one you failed to substantiate with evidence. Meanwhile, your pattern of insubordination and refusal to respect physician authority has been well documented." Human Resources agreed. The union rep who was supposed to defend her had sat silent, already knowing the decision was made before the meeting started. They offered her early retirement with reduced pension or termination for cause with nothing. She took the retirement because she needed something, anything, to survive on. Then they informed her the pension wouldn't start for 6 months, pending an investigation into her conduct. She had $847 in her checking account. Rent was due in 12 days. She was 6 blocks from the hospital when her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket with numb fingers and saw her daughter's name. Sarah Morrison, 24 years old, second-year medical student, currently doing rotations at the same VA hospital that had just destroyed her mother's career. Catherine stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. They hadn't spoken in 6 months, not since Catherine had filed her initial complaint about the falsified records. Sarah had called her selfish. had said she was sabotaging her own daughter's future by making enemies of powerful doctors, had accused her of causing drama for attention. The voicemail notification popped up, but Catherine deleted it without listening. She couldn't handle her daughter's judgment on top of everything else today. The wind off the lake picked up, driving snow directly into her face, and she lowered her head and kept walking, past shuttered shops and empty parking lots, and the kind of urban bleakness that made you understand why people gave up. Her apartment building came into view finally, a 4-story brick structure built in the 1960s that had seen better decades. She lived on the second floor in a 1-bedroom unit with a view of Lake Michigan that would have been valuable if the building wasn't falling apart and the neighborhood wasn't slowly dying. She climbed the exterior stairs carefully, the metal slick with ice, and fumbled her keys from her pocket. Her hands were shaking so badly from cold that she dropped them twice before managing to unlock the door. The apartment was freezing because she'd turned the heat down to save money. She set the cardboard box on her kitchen counter and stared at it. This was her life now. 52 years old, widow, estranged from her only child, unemployable in the only profession she'd ever known, barely enough money to survive another month. She walked to her window and looked out at the lake, at the sheets of snow blowing across the ice, at the gray emptiness that matched exactly how she felt inside. That's when she heard the helicopter. The sound was wrong immediately, a stuttering mechanical scream instead of the steady whoop-whoop of healthy rotors. Catherine's head snapped up and she saw it, a Coast Guard Jayhawk painted in the distinctive orange and white, flying far too low over the frozen lake, trailing black smoke from its tail assembly. She watched in horror as the pilot tried to gain altitude, tried to make it to shore, tried to do anything except what was about to happen. The helicopter dropped like a stone and hit the ice 200 yards from shore. The impact was catastrophic, rotor blades shattering, fuselage crumpling, and then the ice gave way beneath it, and the aircraft punched through into the black water below. It happened in seconds. One moment, there was a helicopter. The next moment, there was a jagged hole in the ice and a sinking machine with people trapped inside. Catherine saw movement through the cockpit windows, saw hands pressed against glass, saw the helicopter tilting as water poured into the cabin and dragged it down. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911 before her conscious brain even registered the decision. 911, what's your emergency? Coast Guard helicopter just crashed into Lake Michigan off Bradford Beach, Catherine said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The aircraft went through the ice approximately 200 yards from shore. I can see crew members trapped inside. It's sinking. How many people, ma'am? I count at least 3. Are you in a safe location? I'm in my apartment watching from the window. Help is on the way, ma'am. Coast Guard rescue teams are being scrambled now. Do not attempt to approach the crash site. The ice is unstable and the water temperature is lethal. Acknowledge that you understand. What's their ETA? Catherine asked. 18 minutes, ma'am. The crew trapped in that helicopter doesn't have 18 minutes, Catherine said. Ma'am, you are not qualified for water rescue. Do not approach the crash site. That is a direct order from emergency services. Catherine hung up. She was already moving, already stripping off her wet coat, and pulling open the closet where she kept things she couldn't bear to throw away. Tom's old rescue swimmer gear. The dry suit wouldn't fit her, but the rope would work. 50 feet of Kernmantle climbing rope rated for rescue operations. She tied one end to the radiator under her window and tested the knot with her full body weight. It held. She looked out the window again. The helicopter was almost completely submerged now, just the tip of the rotor mast visible above water. She could see people on the beach, a handful of dog walkers and joggers, standing and filming with their phones, nobody moving to help. 18 minutes. The crew would be dead in 5. Hypothermia in water that cold incapacitated you in 90 seconds. You had maybe 3 minutes before you lost consciousness. 5 before your heart stopped. Catherine was 52 years old with chronic back pain and hadn't swum laps in a decade. She was not qualified for this rescue. She was not equipped for this rescue. She was not authorized for this rescue. She opened the window, and Arctic air blasted into her apartment. She climbed onto the sill, gripping the rope, looking down at the 20-foot drop to the beach below. Every rational thought in her head was screaming that this was suicide, that she would die in that freezing water, that nobody would thank her for this, that she should wait for the professionals. But Catherine Morrison had spent 28 years listening to people tell her what she couldn't do, what she wasn't qualified for, what wasn't her place. She was done listening. She jumped. The impact with the snow-covered beach knocked the air from her lungs, but she rolled and came up running. The people with phones were shouting at her, telling her she was crazy, that she'd die, that help was coming. She ignored them and hit the water at full sprint. The cold was annihilating, a total system shock that stopped her heart for a beat before it restarted in panicked overdrive. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only force her arms and legs to move in something approximating a swimming stroke. 50 yards, then 100. Then she was at the hole in the ice where the helicopter had gone through, and she took the deepest breath her seizing lungs could manage and dove. The underwater visibility was nearly zero, just murky green darkness and swirling silt, but she felt her way along the sinking fuselage until she found the door. It was jammed. She surfaced, gasped, dove again, used a chunk of ice as a battering ram against the door handle. Third hit, and something gave. The door swung open and bodies floated out, unconscious, not moving. Catherine grabbed the nearest one, a woman in a flight suit, and kicked for the surface. Broke through gasping and drowning and pulled the woman toward shore. Hands reached out from the beach, strangers finally helping, dragging them both onto the ice. Catherine didn't stop. She went back, dove again, found a second crew member, a young man with blood pouring from a head wound, trapped by his harness. She cut it with the rescue knife on his own belt and pulled him free. Brought him up, handed him off. Went back a third time. This time she found the pilot, a kid who couldn't have been more than 22. His leg crushed in the wreckage, eyes open underwater, still conscious, still fighting. Catherine tried to free him, but the metal had him pinned. She surfaced, screamed for tools, dove again with a crowbar someone threw her. Pried at the twisted metal until it shifted enough to pull him free. His leg was destroyed below the knee, arterial blood turning the water black. She knew he had maybe 2 minutes before he bled out. She made a decision that would haunt her forever. Used her belt as a tourniquet underwater, pulled it tight around his thigh with strength she didn't know she possessed, and dragged him to the surface. They broke through together, both of them barely alive, and hands pulled them onto the ice. Catherine collapsed on the frozen beach, her body shutting down from hypothermia, vision tunneling, hearing fading to a high-pitched whine. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was the young pilot's chest rising and falling. Still breathing, still alive. She'd done it. She'd saved them. Then the darkness took her, and she fell into a cold so profound it felt like dying. When she woke up, it was to chaos and sirens, and someone forcing a heated blanket around her shoulders. FBI agents were everywhere. News helicopters circled overhead. And standing over her was a federal agent holding a waterproof case marked classified, looking at Catherine like she'd just walked out of a legend. The agent's voice cut through the noise. "Who are you?" Catherine tried to answer, but her jaw was shaking too hard. The agent tried again. "The woman you pulled out, Lieutenant Santos, she was carrying evidence. Federal evidence. About your hospital. About the veterans who died. About everything you tried to report. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Catherine understood. She understood that the universe had just handed her a weapon. The same people who destroyed her career had just lost control of the narrative. Because now there were witnesses. Now there was proof. And now Catherine Morrison, the nurse they'd thrown away, was about to become the one person they couldn't silence. She looked up at the agent and smiled through chattering teeth. "Tell Dr. Volkov I'm not done yet." The FBI agent's name was Derek Walsh, and he looked like he'd been punched in the face by reality. He sat across from Catherine in the back of a heated ambulance, watching paramedics treat her for hypothermia while trying to process what he'd just witnessed. "You pulled 3 people out of a submerged helicopter in water cold enough to kill you in minutes. You performed a field tourniquet underwater. You saved a federal witness carrying evidence I've been trying to obtain for 6 months. And you did all this 6 hours after being forced into retirement." Catherine's teeth were still chattering, but her mind was sharp. "What evidence?" Walsh glanced at the waterproof case sitting between them. Lieutenant Maya Santos was investigating fraud at Harborview VA Hospital. Falsified records. Medical negligence causing veteran deaths. Kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies. She had proof. Names, dates, financial records. She was flying it to our field office when her helicopter was sabotaged. Catherine's blood went colder than the lake water. Sabotaged? Someone cut a hydraulic line. Made it look like mechanical failure. Santos was supposed to die in that crash. The evidence was supposed to sink to the bottom of Lake Michigan. Walsh looked at her hard. Instead, a fired nurse jumped in freezing water and saved everyone. Coincidence? Catherine stared at the case. That's the hospital I worked at. Those are the records I tried to report. Walsh nodded. I know. I pulled your file after Santos mentioned your name. You filed a complaint 6 months ago about falsified patient charts. Said Dr. Richard Volkov was covering up negligence. Said veterans were dying from preventable complications because the hospital was prioritizing profit over care. You were ignored by administration, threatened by Volkov, and eventually forced out. Catherine's hands curled into fists. They said I was making it up. Said I was a disgruntled employee looking for attention. Said there was no evidence. Walsh tapped the case. There's evidence now. And the people who tried to bury it just tried to kill a federal officer to keep it hidden. Which means you're in danger too. Before Catherine could respond, shouting erupted outside the ambulance. She looked through the rear window and saw Dr. Volkov striding through the emergency response perimeter like he owned it. He had 2 hospital security guards with him and an expression of righteous fury. The paramedic treating Catherine tried to stop him. Sir, this is a restricted medical scene. Volkov shoved past him. I'm Dr. Richard Volkov, Chief of Medicine at Harborview VA. That woman is my former employee and she's committed multiple felonies. I'm here to ensure she's taken into custody. Walsh stepped out of the ambulance, positioning himself between Volkov and Catherine. Doctor, this is a federal investigation. You need to step back. Volkov didn't step back. He stepped forward. That woman has no medical license. She practiced medicine without authorization. She interfered with a crash scene. She stole federal property. He pointed at the waterproof case. That case was in the possession of Coast Guard personnel. She had no right to remove it. Walsh smiled without humor. She pulled it off a drowning woman she'd just saved. Should she have left it to sink? Volkov's face reddened. She's a liar and a troublemaker who was terminated for cause. Whatever she's told you is false. She falsifies records, fabricates complaints, and has a documented history of mental instability following her husband's death. Catherine climbed out of the ambulance, the heated blanket still around her shoulders, paramedics protesting. She walked right up to Volkov. Her voice was quiet, but carried like a blade. My husband died saving people. He was a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. He taught me that you don't wait for permission when lives are at stake. I just pulled 3 people from a submerged helicopter using his training. What have you done today, Richard? Besides try to cover up the fact that you've been killing veterans for profit? The crowd that had gathered, news cameras, police, Coast Guard personnel, went silent. Volkov's jaw worked. You have no proof. Catherine pointed at the case in Walsh's hands. Lieutenant Santos has proof. Financial records. Falsified charts. The same charts you order me to sign. The same charts I refused to sign because they covered up the fact that Marine Sergeant David Chun died from a medication error you made. You prescribed the wrong dosage of blood thinners post-surgery. He bled internally for 6 hours before anyone noticed. By the time I found him, he was already gone. You told me to mark it as complications from pre-existing conditions. I said no. So you destroyed my career. Volkov's face went from red to white. That's slander. That's the truth, Catherine said. And it's all in that case. Every patient you killed. Every record you falsified. Every kickback you took from drug companies to prescribe expensive medications over cheaper alternatives. 6 months ago, I tried to report you. I was silenced. Today the evidence came home. And you tried to kill it. Walsh was already on his phone. I need backup at Bradford Beach. Federal witness protection protocols. And I need a warrant for Dr. Richard Volkov's arrest. Volkov backed up. You can't arrest me. I haven't done anything. You just admitted on camera that you pressured a nurse to falsify records, Walsh said, pointing at the news crews filming everything. And we have testimony from Lieutenant Santos that someone sabotaged her helicopter to prevent this evidence from reaching us. Care to explain where you were this morning? Hospital security tried to pull Volkov back, but FBI agents were already moving in. Volkov pointed at Catherine. She's the criminal. She practiced medicine without a license. I'm bringing charges. Do it, Catherine said. Charge me with saving 3 lives. Charge me with refusing to let people drown. Charge me with telling the truth. See how that plays in court when the families of dead veterans testify about what you did to their loved ones. Volkov was handcuffed and read his rights while cameras captured every moment. As agents led him away, he locked eyes with Catherine. This isn't over. You're right, Catherine said. It's just beginning. Walsh turned to her as Volkov was pushed into a federal vehicle. You just made yourself a target. Everyone involved in this conspiracy now knows you're alive and talking. They'll come for you. Catherine watched the ambulance loading Lieutenant Santos, watched the paramedics working on Petty Officer Rivera, whose leg she'd saved. Let them come. I've got nothing left to lose. You've got your life, Walsh said. Is that enough? Catherine thought about her empty apartment, her estranged daughter, her destroyed career, her $847. Then she thought about the 3 people breathing because she'd jumped into freezing water. Yeah, she said. It's enough. Her phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. Mom, I'm watching the news. Everyone's watching the news. You jumped in the lake. You saved them. Call me. Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Catherine stared at the message. Walsh noticed. Family. My daughter. Medical student. Interning at Harborview. She hasn't spoken to me in 6 months because I embarrassed her by reporting Volkov. Walsh grimaced. She's going to have a rough week when this hits. The hospital's going under federal investigation. Everyone associated with Volkov will be questioned. Catherine typed back. I'm okay. We'll talk soon. Sarah's response was immediate. I was wrong. About everything. You were right. They're already shutting down the hospital. Patients are being transferred. Doctors are being interviewed. Mom, what did you do? I told the truth, Catherine typed. Finally, someone listened. She looked up as a news reporter broke through the police line. Ma'am, you saved 3 lives today. How does it feel to be a hero? Catherine pushed past her. I'm not a hero. I'm a nurse. There's a difference. The reporter followed. You were fired this morning, and by afternoon you're pulling people from a frozen lake. That's incredible. That's doing my job, Catherine said. Nurses don't stop being nurses just because someone takes away our badge. Another reporter. What do you say to Dr. Volkov's claims that you're unqualified? Catherine stopped. Turned. Looked directly into the camera. I say I just saved 3 lives with a belt and a kitchen knife while the man who called me unqualified was covering up medical negligence that killed veterans. You tell me who's qualified. The footage went viral within an hour. By evening, Catherine Morrison was trending on social media. Fired nurse saves Coast Guard crew. Hero nurse exposes VA scandal. Someone created a GoFundMe for her legal defense that raised $50,000 in 6 hours. Someone else started a petition demanding her reinstatement. News outlets were calling her phone nonstop. She turned it off. Walsh found her sitting on a bench outside the emergency command center, still wrapped in the heated blanket, watching the sun set over Lake Michigan. You should go home. Get warm. Rest. Can't, Catherine said. Home is freezing because I can't afford heat. And I can't rest because every time I close my eyes I see Sergeant Chin bleeding out because Volkov was too arrogant to admit his mistake. Walsh sat beside her. Santos is awake. Asking for you. Catherine looked up. Is she okay? Broken ribs. Punctured lung. Hypothermia. But alive. She wants to thank you. I don't need thanks. You're getting it anyway. Come on. They walked to the hospital where Santos had been taken. The irony wasn't lost on Catherine. She'd been banned from practicing medicine that morning. Now she was walking through an ER as the woman who'd saved a federal witness. Nurses stared. Doctors whispered. Catherine kept her head up. Santos was in ICU, hooked to monitors, oxygen mask on, but conscious. She saw Catherine and pulled off the mask. You jumped in a frozen lake for me. Catherine shrugged. Seemed like the thing to do. You saved my life. And I'm returning the favor. Santos pointed to the waterproof case on the bedside table. That evidence destroys Volkov. Destroys everyone involved. Pharmaceutical reps, hospital administrators, politicians who took bribes to look the other way. It's everything you tried to report 6 months ago. Everything they silenced you for. Now it's going public. Because of you. Catherine sat down heavily. I just wanted someone to listen. Someone did, Santos said. Me. I've been investigating this for 8 months. Interviewing families. Collecting documents. Building a case. Volkov found out. That's why the helicopter was sabotaged. They thought killing me would end it. They were wrong. She looked at Catherine. You were wrong too. About what? About having nothing left to lose. You've got us now. Everyone you saved. We're not letting this go. That night, Catherine's apartment was surrounded by news vans. FBI agents were posted outside for protection. Inside, Walsh was setting up surveillance equipment while Catherine tried to process the day. This morning I was nobody. Tonight, I'm on every news channel in the country. Walsh tested a camera. You were always somebody. The system just didn't recognize it. What happens now? Now we build a case. Santos's evidence gets us warrants. We raid the hospital, interview witnesses, arrest everyone involved. And you testify. Me? You're the whistleblower who started this. The nurse who refused to falsify records. The woman who risked everything to tell the truth. Your testimony puts Volkov away for life. Catherine looked at the cardboard box still sitting on her counter. Her whole career in 4 pounds of memories. What if I'm not strong enough? Walsh looked at her. You jumped in a frozen lake to save strangers. You're strong enough. Her phone buzzed. Sarah calling. Catherine answered. Mom. Hey baby. I saw everything. The rescue. The arrest. The news. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you. I thought you were causing trouble. I was so wrong. Sarah was crying. It's okay, Catherine said. No, it's not. You lost everything because you told the truth and I abandoned you. I chose my career over you. I'm so sorry. Catherine wiped her own tears. You're young. You didn't understand. I understand now, Sarah said. I quit my internship at Harborview. I'm testifying too. Sarah, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because you taught me that being a doctor means telling the truth even when it costs you everything. I'm your daughter. It's time I acted like it. They talked for an hour. When Catherine hung up, Walsh was smiling. Family back? Yeah. Walsh nodded. Good. You're going to need them. Because tomorrow the real fight starts. Volkov's lawyers are already filing motions. The hospital is lawyering up. Pharmaceutical companies are mobilizing their legal teams. This is going to get ugly. Catherine looked out at Lake Michigan, at the spot where the helicopter had crashed, where 3 people had almost died. Bring it on. I've been drowning for 6 months. Time to pull some other people under. The federal courthouse was a madhouse. Catherine arrived at dawn surrounded by FBI agents, pushing through a crowd of reporters screaming questions, cameras flashing like strobe lights. Inside the grand jury hearing room, she sat at a table facing 12 citizens who would decide whether Dr. Richard Volkov and 17 other defendants would stand trial. Walsh handed her a folder 3 inches thick. These are the patients who died, veterans who trusted the system. She opened it and saw faces. Names. Service records. Sergeant David Chun, Marine Corps, 2 tours in Iraq, died from internal bleeding. Corporal James Wilson, Army, medic, died from medication interaction. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, Air Force, died from post-surgical infection that antibiotics would have prevented. 37 veterans total. All dead. All preventable. Catherine looked at the grand jury. Every one of these people had families. Had futures. They survived war only to die in a hospital that prioritized profit over care. Dr. Volkov falsified their death certificates. Marked them as natural complications. Took kickbacks from drug companies to prescribe expensive medications that didn't work. And when I tried to report it, he destroyed my career. The defense attorney, a man named Preston who cost $1,000 an hour, stood up. Ms. Morrison, you were terminated for insubordination and mental instability, weren't you? I was terminated for refusing to lie. That's not what your personnel file says. My personnel file was written by the man I was reporting. Preston pulled out documents. It says here you were frequently late, made medication errors, and had conflicts with multiple doctors. Catherine's jaw clenched. I was late twice in 28 years. Both times because I was staying late to save patients. I never made a medication error. And my conflicts were with doctors who were killing people. Preston smiled. Or perhaps you're a disgruntled employee making false allegations. Walsh stood. Objection. Ms. Morrison risked her life saving 3 people yesterday. Her credibility is established. Preston turned to the jury. Or perhaps she staged a dramatic rescue to gain sympathy before testifying. To make herself look heroic when she's actually covering up her own incompetence. Catherine stood so fast her chair fell backward. I jumped in a frozen lake and pulled 3 dying people from a submerged helicopter. I performed emergency field medicine with a belt and kitchen knives. I saved a federal witness carrying the evidence you're trying to suppress. Don't you dare call that incompetence. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Ms. Morrison, sit down. Catherine sat. Preston wasn't done. Let's talk about your husband. Tom Morrison, Coast Guard rescue swimmer, died during a rescue operation 5 years ago. You blamed the Coast Guard for sending him on a dangerous mission. You sued them, lost, developed what your therapist called complicated grief and fixation on institutional betrayal. Perhaps this entire vendetta against Dr. Volkov is just displaced anger at the system that you blame for your husband's death. Catherine's hands were shaking, but her voice was steel. My husband died saving people. That's what he did. That's what I do. The difference is the Coast Guard didn't try to cover up his death by falsifying records and calling it mechanical failure. Volkov did. To 37 veterans. And you're defending him because he pays you. Preston opened his mouth, but Walsh cut him off by placing a laptop on the table. He opened a video file. The jury watched footage from the helicopter crash. Watched Catherine jump from her window. Watched her swim through freezing water. Watched her dive again and again, pulling out crew members. Watched her perform a tourniquet underwater. The room was silent except for the sound of wind and water and Catherine's gasping breaths on the recording. When it finished, Walsh played a second video. Security footage from Harborview VA Hospital. Dr. Volkov entering the pharmacy at 2 a.m. accessing medication records. Changing dosage entries. Deleting error reports. The timestamp matched the night Sergeant Chin died. Then Walsh played audio. Volkov's voice recorded during a staff meeting. We need to be mindful of optics. If error rates appear too high, we lose federal funding. If a patient death can reasonably be attributed to pre-existing conditions rather than treatment complications, that's the attribution we use. Are we clear? Murmurs of agreement from staff. Then Catherine's voice. That's falsification. We're asking you to use clinical judgment. You're asking me to lie. The recording cut off. Walsh looked at the jury. Ms. Morrison refused. Was terminated 3 days later. And yesterday, when evidence of this conspiracy was being transported to federal authorities, the aircraft carrying it was sabotaged. 3 people nearly died. Would have died if not for the woman Mr. Preston is trying to discredit. Preston was sweating now. The sabotage hasn't been proven. It's mechanical failure. Walsh pulled out a report. FAA investigation confirms hydraulic line was deliberately cut. Someone with access to Coast Guard maintenance facilities did this. Someone who knew Lieutenant Santos was carrying evidence. Someone who had everything to lose. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. We find sufficient evidence to indict Dr. Richard Volkov on charges of medical fraud, negligent homicide, falsification of federal records, and conspiracy to commit murder. We find sufficient evidence to indict 17 additional defendants, including hospital administrators, pharmaceutical representatives, and 1 Coast Guard maintenance officer. Catherine closed her eyes. Relief washed over her like the lake water. Walsh squeezed her shoulder. You did it. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed again. Ms. Morrison, how do you feel? Tired. Do you consider yourself a hero? I consider myself someone who did what anyone should do. Tell the truth. Save lives. Refuse to look away. What's next for you? Catherine looked at the cameras. I'm going back to work. But you were fired. Then they'll have to hire me back. Because there are more veterans who need care. More hospitals with corruption. More nurses afraid to speak up. I'm not afraid anymore. And neither should anyone else be. Sarah was waiting at Catherine's apartment. She hugged her mother hard. I'm so proud of you. Catherine held her daughter. I'm sorry I put you through this. Don't be. You taught me what integrity looks like. Sarah pulled back. I spoke to the dean. Told him everything I witnessed at Harborview. He's launching an investigation. Half the residents are being questioned. Some of my professors are implicated. My whole program might collapse. Catherine searched her daughter's face. Do you regret it? Sarah shook her head. I regret not believing you sooner. They sat together while news coverage played on mute. Catherine's face was everywhere. The nurse who exposed a national scandal. The hero who saved lives and brought down the corrupt. Catherine didn't feel like a hero. She felt exhausted and scared because Volkov had been arrested, but his lawyers were already filing appeals. The pharmaceutical companies were threatening countersuits. Anonymous messages were flooding her phone. Some supportive, some threatening. One said simply, you should have drowned. Walsh arrived with updates. Volkov made bail. $2 million posted by an unnamed benefactor. He's out. Catherine's stomach dropped. He's dangerous. He's desperate, Walsh corrected. His medical license is suspended. His reputation destroyed. His co-conspirators are turning on him. He's got nothing to lose. Where is he? We don't know. He cut his ankle monitor 3 hours ago. We've got teams looking, but he's gone. Catherine stood. He's coming for me. We have protection outside. Agents watching the building. He won't get near you. You don't know him like I do. He's arrogant. Entitled. He thinks he's untouchable. And now he's been humiliated on national television. Men like that don't run. They retaliate. Walsh pulled his weapon and checked it. Then we'll be ready. That night Catherine couldn't sleep. She sat by the window watching the lake. Watching the spot where she'd jumped in, where everything had changed. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello? A raspy voice, barely recognizable. Volkov, you destroyed me. You destroyed yourself. I prescribed one wrong dosage. One mistake in a 30-year career. You covered it up. Let a man die. Falsified records. Killed 36 more people trying to hide it. That's not a mistake. That's murder. Silence. Then, where are you, Catherine? Home. Alone? She looked at the FBI agents in her living room. No. Volkov laughed, hollow and bitter. You think you've won. You think you're safe. You're not. This isn't over. I know people. Powerful people. They're not going to let this stand. They'll make you disappear. They'll call it suicide. Troubled widow couldn't handle the pressure. Everyone will believe it. Catherine's voice didn't shake. Let them try. I've got federal protection. I've got evidence. I've got the truth. And you've got nothing but guilt and fear. See you in court, Richard. She hung up. Walsh was already tracing the call. He's at a payphone downtown. Teams are moving. Catherine stood. I'm going with you. Absolutely not. He threatened me. I'm going. 20 minutes later they arrived at the location. Empty payphone, receiver dangling. No sign of Volkov. But there was something else. A photo taped to the phone. Catherine picked it up, and her blood turned to ice. It was her daughter Sarah leaving the hospital. Taken today. Recent. With a message scrawled on the back. You took everything from me. Now I take everything from you. Catherine ran for the car. Walsh was already calling Sarah's number. No answer. Calling campus security. Calling local police. Catherine's hands were shaking as she dialed Sarah again. Pick up. Pick up. Pick up. Voicemail. Mom, it's Sarah. I'm at the library studying. My phone's on silent. I'll call you back. The timestamp was from 2 hours ago. Walsh drove like he was in a chase scene. Lights flashing, sirens screaming. Campus police met them at the library. Sarah Morrison was in the medical section studying when a man in a maintenance uniform approached her. Security footage showed him talking to her, showing her something on his phone. Sarah going pale, following him out a side exit. Catherine watched the footage. The maintenance uniform was stolen from the hospital. The man's face was partially hidden, but she recognized his walk. His posture. Volkov. Where did they go? Catherine demanded. Campus security pulled up more footage. A black sedan, no plates, leaving through the west gate. Sarah in the passenger seat. Volkov driving. Gone. Catherine's world narrowed to a single point of focus. Find my daughter. Walsh was coordinating with every law enforcement agency in the state. APB on the vehicle. Roadblocks. Helicopter search. FBI tactical teams mobilizing. But Catherine knew Volkov. Knew how he thought. He's not running. He's making a statement. What kind of statement? The kind that ends with someone dying on camera to prove he still has power. He's taking her somewhere public. Somewhere symbolic. Catherine closed her eyes and thought. Where would Volkov go to humiliate her? To destroy her? Then it hit her. The hospital. He's taking her to Harborview. They raced across the city. Harborview VA Hospital was supposed to be closed, evacuated during the federal investigation. But lights were on in the top floor. The administrative wing. Volkov's old office. Walsh called for backup, but Catherine was already running for the entrance. Tactical teams breached the building. Swept floor by floor. Found nothing until they reached the top. Volkov's office door was open. Inside, Sarah sat in a chair, hands zip-tied, duct tape over her mouth. Volkov stood behind her, holding a scalpel to her throat. One step closer, and she dies. Catherine stepped into the doorway alone. Walsh and his team positioned in the hallway, weapons drawn. Let her go, Richard. This is between us. Volkov smiled. Finally. You understand. This was always between us. You and me. The nurse who thought she was better than a doctor. The troublemaker who destroyed everything I built. I'm giving you a choice, Catherine. You. Or her. Come here. Let me end you. And she walks away. Catherine didn't hesitate. She walked forward. Hands up. Unarmed. I'm here. Let her go. Volkov's hand shook. The scalpel pressed against Sarah's neck, drawing a thin line of blood. Why should I? Because you're not a killer, Richard. You're a coward. A liar. A fraud. But you're not a killer. Not like this. Not in cold blood. Volkov's eyes were wild. You don't know what I am. Then prove it. Let her go. Take me. End this. Volkov stared at her. Catherine saw it in his face. The moment of choice. The decision that would define everything. He pushed Sarah away. She fell forward, crying. Catherine caught her. And in that moment, Walsh and his team stormed in. Volkov raised the scalpel, pointed it at his own throat. I won't let you have this. Won't let you win. Catherine looked at him. We already won, Richard. You just haven't accepted it yet. Volkov collapsed. The scalpel clattered to the floor. Agents swarmed. Catherine held her daughter while FBI took Volkov into custody. It's over, Sarah sobbed. It's over. Not yet, Catherine said. But it will be. 3 months later, Catherine stood in front of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. The hearing room was packed with families of the 37 veterans who had died, with journalists, with advocates, with people who had traveled across the country to watch her testimony. Senator Williams gavelled the room to order. Ms. Morrison, you're here today because your actions exposed one of the largest medical fraud cases in VA history. We need to understand how this happened and how to prevent it from happening again. Catherine adjusted her microphone. Her voice was steady. It happened because people in power believed they were untouchable. Because whistleblowers were punished instead of protected. Because the system valued reputation over truth. And it will happen again unless you change the incentives. Make it easier to report corruption than to cover it up. Protect the people who speak up instead of destroying them. And understand that nurses aren't just following orders. We're healthcare professionals who see what doctors miss. Listen to us. Senator Richards leaned forward. You lost your career, your pension, nearly your life. Was it worth it? Catherine looked at the families in the gallery. Saw Sergeant Chin's widow holding their daughter. Saw Corporal Wilson's parents who had flown in from Texas. Saw faces of people whose loved ones had died preventable deaths. 37 veterans are dead because I didn't act sooner. Because I tried to work within the system. Because I was scared of losing my job. So no, it wasn't worth it. I should have done this years ago. I should have gone public the first time Volkov asked me to falsify a record. Every day I waited, someone else died. I have to live with that. But I can make sure it doesn't happen to the next nurse. The next whistleblower. The next person who sees something wrong and has to choose between their career and their conscience. Make that choice easier. Make doing the right thing the safe thing. That's how you prevent this. The committee room erupted in applause. Senator Williams banged his gavel but didn't stop it. When the room quieted, he announced new legislation. The Morrison Act, requiring independent review of all VA patient deaths, mandatory reporting channels for healthcare workers, and federal protection for medical whistleblowers. Catherine's name would be attached to the law that changed everything. Outside the Capitol, reporters swarmed. Ms. Morrison, Dr. Volkov was sentenced to 25 years this morning. How do you feel? Catherine stopped. 25 years isn't enough. It won't bring back the people he killed. But it sends a message. You can't hide behind a white coat and a medical degree. If you harm patients, you face consequences. What about the others? 17 co-defendants. Hospital administrators got 10 to 15 years. Pharmaceutical reps got 5 to 8. The Coast Guard maintenance officer who sabotaged the helicopter got life. Everyone who participated in the conspiracy is facing justice. And your career? What's next? Catherine smiled. I'm starting a nonprofit. Training nurses to recognize fraud. Teaching them how to report safely. Making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to others. Plus, I got my license back. The Wisconsin Board of Nursing issued a formal apology and full reinstatement. Harborview offered me my job back. Did you take it? Hell no. That place needs to be torn down and rebuilt. I'm working at a different VA now. One that actually cares about veterans. Starting Monday. Sarah appeared beside her mother, wearing her white coat, newly graduated from medical school despite everything. A reporter noticed. Dr. Morrison, you were in medical school when this scandal broke. How did it affect you? Sarah squeezed her mother's hand. I almost quit. The program I was in collapsed. Professors I respected were implicated. Everything I thought I knew about medicine was wrong. But my mother taught me something. She taught me that medicine isn't about prestige or status or protecting institutions. It's about patience. Always patience. If you lose sight of that, you lose everything. I'm starting my residency at the same VA where she works. Following in her footsteps, Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Proudest moment of my life. The cameras captured the embrace. Mother and daughter, nurse and doctor, whistleblower and ally. The image would be on the cover of Time magazine the following week with the headline, "The Women Who Saved the VA." But Catherine didn't care about magazines or accolades. She cared about the work. The phone calls she got from nurses across the country asking for advice. The training sessions she ran teaching people how to document properly, how to report safely, how to protect themselves while protecting patients. The families who reached out to thank her for giving them answers about how their loved ones died. Lieutenant Maya Santos had recovered fully and returned to active duty. She visited Catherine regularly, brought her Coast Guard challenge coins, told stories about the rescue swimmer training she was now helping teach. "You changed the Coast Guard too?" Santos said over coffee one afternoon. After the sabotage investigation, they overhauled maintenance protocols, implemented triple-checking systems, random audits. "What happened to me can't happen again. Because of you. Because you didn't let me drown." Catherine shook her head. "You didn't let me drown either. That evidence you carried, that was my vindication. My proof. You risked your life to transport it. We saved each other." Santos raised her coffee cup. To saving each other. Catherine clinked her cup against it. To refusing to look away. Petty Officer James Rivera had recovered too, though he'd lost his leg below the knee. He'd been fitted with a prosthetic and was back to limited duty. He sent Catherine a photo of himself running a 5K with the caption, "Still here because of you." She kept it on her refrigerator next to a drawing from Sergeant Chen's daughter. A crayon picture of an angel with a stethoscope. The caption said, "Thank you for trying to save my daddy." Catherine cried every time she looked at it. Dr. Volkov's trial had been a media sensation. Catherine testified for 3 days. Detailed every falsified record, every covered-up error, every threat he'd made. The defense tried to discredit her, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. When the sentence was read, 25 years in federal prison, Volkov had stared at Catherine across the courtroom. She stared back. Didn't flinch. Didn't look away. After he was led away in handcuffs, a reporter asked if she felt vindicated. "No," Catherine said. "Vindication would be those 37 veterans being alive. This is just accountability. It's not the same thing. But it's something." The families of the deceased veterans had filed a class action lawsuit against Harborview VA Hospital and the pharmaceutical companies involved. Catherine was the star witness. The case settled for $400 million. Every family received compensation. The hospital was placed under federal oversight. 3 executives went to prison. The pharmaceutical companies faced massive fines and restrictions. And Catherine's legal fees, which had been mounting terrifyingly, were covered by a portion of the settlement designated for whistleblower protection. 6 months after the rescue, Catherine returned to Lake Michigan, stood on the beach where she'd pulled 3 people from freezing water. A memorial had been erected, a bronze plaque commemorating the crash and rescue. Her name was on it, Catherine Morrison, whose courage saved 3 lives and exposed a national scandal. She touched the cold metal and remembered the feeling of drowning, of hypothermia shutting down her body, of thinking she would die in that water. And she remembered the feeling of hands grabbing the people she'd saved, of pulling them to safety, of knowing she'd done something that mattered. Walsh found her there. FBI had promoted him after the case closed. He was heading a new task force investigating healthcare fraud nationwide. Thinking about it, Walsh asked. "Every day," Catherine said. "Do you regret it? Jumping in? Risking everything?" She thought about the question. About her destroyed career that had been rebuilt. About her estranged daughter, who was now her closest ally. About the law that bore her name. About the lives saved and the system changed and the truth finally told. "No," she said. "I regret that I had to. I regret that the system was so broken that it took a helicopter crash and a near-death experience to expose it. But jumping in, saving them, telling the truth? No regrets." Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her. "Hello?" A young voice, male, nervous. "Is this Catherine Morrison?" "Yes. My name is Private Marcus Webb. I'm stationed at Fort Campbell. My commanding officer, he's been covering up training accidents. Soldiers are getting hurt, and he's blaming them instead of fixing the equipment. 3 guys have been injured in 6 months. I tried to report it through channels, but I'm getting threatened. Transferred." They're trying to force me out. I saw what you did. How you stood up. I was wondering do you have any advice? Catherine's jaw set. Where are you right now? In my barracks. Alone? Yes, ma'am. Stay there. I'm making some calls. You're not alone anymore. Private Webb's voice cracked. Thank you. Thank you so much. I thought I was crazy. Thought I was the only one seeing this. You're not crazy. You're awake. And that's the hardest thing to be. She hung up and immediately called Walsh. We've got another one. Walsh sighed, but she could hear him smiling. Where? Fort Campbell. Equipment failures being covered up. Soldiers being threatened for reporting. Can you get someone down there? Already dialing. Catherine, you know you can't save everyone, right? I can try. That's all any of us can do. Try. That night Sarah came over for dinner. They cooked together in Catherine's small kitchen. The apartment that had once felt like a prison now felt like home. The rent was paid. The heat worked. The cardboard box with Tom's photo was unpacked, and his picture sat on the mantel where it belonged. Mom, Sarah said while chopping vegetables. I got an offer. Academic hospital in Boston. Teaching position. Great salary. Amazing benefits. It's everything I dreamed about. Catherine heard the hesitation. But it's not the work. It's not veterans. It's not what you taught me medicine should be. So I turned it down. I'm staying at the VA. Sarah, you don't have to follow my path. I'm not following your path, Sarah said. I'm following my own. You just showed me what it looks like. They ate dinner and talked about the future. About the Morrison Act being implemented. About the nurses who were coming forward with their own stories. About the system slowly, painfully, beginning to change. After Sarah left, Catherine stood at her window looking out at the lake. The water was calm tonight. Peaceful. She thought about the question Walsh had asked. About regret. About whether it was worth it. And she thought about Private Webb, somewhere in Kentucky, no longer alone because she'd answered the phone. The next morning Catherine put on her scrubs. Blue, clean, with her name embroidered on the pocket. Catherine Morrison, RN. She clipped her badge to her waist. Valid license. Current credentials. Full authority to practice. She grabbed her stethoscope, the one Tom had given her 30 years ago, and headed to work. The VA hospital where she worked now wasn't perfect. Nowhere was. But it was better. And she was part of making it better. Room by room. Patient by patient. Truth by truth. In the ER, a young nurse approached her nervously. Ms. Morrison, I wanted to say, I read about what you did. About the whistleblowing and the rescue and everything. You're kind of my hero. Catherine smiled. I'm just a nurse who refused to look away. That's all. The young nurse hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course. What do you do when you see something wrong, but you're scared to report it? You report it anyway, Catherine said. Because fear is temporary, but regret is forever. And because patients are counting on you to be brave, even when you're terrified. The young nurse nodded. Thank you. Catherine squeezed her shoulder. And if you ever need backup, you call me. Always. That's what we do. We have each other's backs. The shift began. Patients arrived. Veterans who had served their country and deserved the best care possible. Catherine treated each one like they were the most important person in the world. Because they were. That was the job. That was the calling. That was what it meant to be a nurse. Not the badge or the title or the authority. The commitment. To see suffering and respond. To witness wrong and speak up. To face impossible choices and choose compassion every single time. At the end of her shift, Catherine walked out into the winter evening. Snow was falling gently. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through messages. 3 more whistleblowers had contacted her. Nurses, technicians, doctors, all seeing corruption and finally finding the courage to speak. She would call them back, would help them navigate the system, would make sure they didn't face what she faced alone. Because that was the other job, the one that came after survival. Helping others survive too. She walked to her car thinking about the journey. From fired nurse to federal witness. From drowning in a frozen lake to drowning in purpose. From having nothing to having everything that mattered. The system hadn't wanted to change. But she'd forced it to. One rescue. One testimony. One truth at a time. And she wasn't done. Not even close. There were more veterans to protect. More whistleblowers to support. More corruption to expose. More lives to save. Catherine Morrison started her car and drove home through the snow, ready for whatever came next. Because she'd learned something in that frozen lake. You don't drown when you keep swimming. You don't fail when you keep fighting. And you don't stop being a nurse just because someone tries to take your badge. You are who you choose to be. And Catherine Morrison chose to be someone who never looked away. If this story just proved that one person standing up can change an entire system, that courage isn't about being fearless, but about acting despite the fear, that real heroes are the ones who refuse to stay silent when everyone else is covering their ears, then subscribe right now, because the world needs more people like Catherine Morrison, and the only way we honor her story is by becoming the kind of people who jump into freezing water to save strangers, who risk everything to tell the truth, who understand that doing the right thing costs everything, but doing nothing costs your soul. So hit that subscribe button, and let's build a world where whistleblowers are celebrated, not destroyed, where nurses are heard, not silenced, where the truth matters more than protecting the powerful, because that's the world Catherine fought for, and it's the world we all deserve.